Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's middle grade mentor live video chat. If you're finding this video on accident and you don't really know what pitchwars is, make sure you go to our website at pitchwars.org. But a short rundown is that Pitchwars is a mentoring organization where established writers and industry professionals choose one mentor or one mentee to do a full round of edits on their manuscript and get them ready for submitting for publication. But make sure you go to pitchwars.org and find out more about the contest. And then also, if you miss some of the previous videos or if you're not catching this live, you can go to this website, bit.ly/pitchwarslive, to see the other video chats that we have, and all the future video chats are going to be added to that link as well, so you can see them all in one spot. If you are watching us and you want to ask questions, make sure you go to the YouTube link and ask questions there on YouTube. That's going to be the easiest way for us to see them and the easiest way for them to get to us. You can ask questions by sending or adding Pitchwars, so at Pitchwars on Twitter, and Lee will transfer the questions over to us on YouTube, but that's going to take a little bit longer for your question to get to us. So it is much better to do it on the YouTube page. So now I'm going to have the mentors introduce themselves, and I'm going to remember to introduce myself this time. I'm Sarah Nicolas. I am the managing director for 2019 Pitchwars. I was a mentor from 2012 to 2017, and then I was a social media director last year, and now I'm the managing director. And I'm the author of Keeping Her Secret, which is a young adult romance set at a summer camp.
Hi, I am Maria Fraser, and last year I mentored middle grade as well, and this year I am very excited to be joined by Mira Jehan, and we are Team Awesome Chocolate Chip Cookies.
Hi, I'm Julie Arts. I was a mentee in 2015, mentored by the lovely Juliana Brandt. And I have been mentoring the past 2 years with Jessica Vitalis as part of Team Unicorn Mojo. So we're really excited to be back for a third year mentoring middle grade together.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Petruck, and I'm the middle grade author of Steering Toward Normal and Boy Bites Bug, which is the most recent, and now in paperback. I have mentored, this will be my 5th year and my 6th mentee because I had gotten a lucky wild card 1 year. And I am super excited to meet my future mentee.
Hi, I'm Jessica Bayless, and I am the author of the book 10 After Closing, a young adult thriller, and I don't have the picture or the cover to show you, but I've mentored in Pitchwars twice so far. I mentored in middle grade in 2017 and last year in young adult, and now I'm back in middle grade again, and I'm excited to be here.
All right, hello everyone. I did want to make a quick announcement because I found out right before we went live, Pitchwars mentor Maxim Martineau just had her baby. So congratulations, Maxim.
Yay.
Yeah. So just how this is going to work is we're getting questions on YouTube and I'm going to bring them to our mentors. If it's a procedural question or something like that that I can just answer real quick, I'm just going to answer it and get on to the more opinion related questions. So and the reason why I mentioned that is the first question is one of those. When we submit to the 4 mentors, do we use one generic query letter that goes to all 4 choices, or we can customize to individual wish lists? Thank you all for time today helping us get ready for Pitchwars. That information is actually available on our website, but it is one query that goes to all 4 mentors. We're getting... Mimi says, yay. Hi, Mimi. Mimi is a former mentee who lives in my area. All right. we have a question. Is it okay to submit to Pitchwars if I have a finished second draft, but it's not polished to the utmost yet? Anybody have an opinion?
I think an unpolished second draft is fine for us. We discourage people from sending us their unpolished first draft because we tend to really dig in, and a first draft is likely to be a pretty big rewrite if you're working with Jessica and I. But a second draft, I think it's good to have the attitude that it's a rough second draft and you're ready to really dig in, because Pitch Wars is not just a spit, shine, and polish. For the most part, it's really you should expect big changes and working hard during the mentorship period.
I think that I totally agree. And I also think that the word utmost means something different to different people. So definitely, like, it would be great if you did everything that you feel like is in your power that you could have possibly done. And for like someone like me, I might think, oh, I did everything in my power that I could have possibly done. It's totally polished. And so other people, like our smart question asker, might think, oh, well, there's still more that could be done. And there is, and so we can still go in and revise a whole lot. So yeah, but I think that as long as it's not the first draft, as long as you have worked on it, that seems good to me.
All right. So we don't have any questions. They're still coming in. People are still sending on to the chat, but luckily I have some questions, so we can fill that time. So everyone here has been a mentor before, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Okay. So what can you tell us a little bit about your mentoring style, and also like what you think might set you apart from other mentors, without putting other mentors down, of course, because they're all wonderful.
Well, to follow up on what Maria and Julie said, as far as the revision process, I think for all of my mentees, and I know for many of the other mentors, mentees, we do a pretty substantial rewrite. But I don't want that to intimidate people into thinking, oh, I'm going to have to rewrite every single word from beginning to end. Yes, actually you are, but you will be reusing a lot of elements from the original manuscript, often in a different order or in a different way. Often it's trimming and kind of digging deeper into a few of the key scenes. So it is a lot of work, but we're choosing manuscripts that already have, good bones. So I don't want people to be intimidated thinking about that huge rewrite. I think for all of us, we're pretty realistic, especially since we all have experience now. We're pretty realistic about what can be accomplished in the time. And we're not trying to set anyone up for failure. So we choose a manuscript and someone with writing that we feel like already has it enough that we can, get the work done. And often, for other manuscripts, we might send, some notes after the fact, just to kind of help some people get to the next level. But we were talking about this just before we signed on. For me, in revision, I tend to think in three. So I think, what are the next three things that we can work on that will take this manuscript to the next level? Because I don't want to overwhelm anyone, but I do want to, push you beyond, what you've already accomplished on your own. And for me in particular, I am very good with structure and plot, the emotional character arc, how those three kind of weave together. So often I'm choosing manuscripts that I see have good bones, but are often in the wrong order or have emphasis in the wrong places. And so then we can kind of restructure to focus on where the heart actually is, and carry the reader, so they have that wonderful emotional catharsis by, the climax of the book.
For me, what I like to do is start by talking with my mentee as to what I see as what's coming through to me as the reader in the book. What's sort of my big picture takeaway as someone seeing it for the first time. And then I like to chat with them to get a feel for what is it that they're actually trying to do with the book. What are they trying to communicate? And to start by looking at where are there some discrepancies, or where perhaps is there a component of what they're really trying to do that's not coming through. So that's one of the things that I like to do at the beginning before even giving my notes or a document or an edit letter. And when I'm able to hear that, I can actually be reading to do the inline edits with now the author's vision in mind, so that we can figure out together ways to really enhance that. I'm also very honest in my approach. So if I feel that there's something that's not working, or something that I think could really strengthen the book, but it does take it in a new direction, I'm like everybody else here. I certainly will propose large edits if I think that would be helpful. So I'll always be honest, but it's always the author's book. So if there's something about my recommendations, or a structural change, or a plot change, or a theme that I'm seeing that maybe isn't working, or maybe could be pulled in, and the author really isn't into that, I'm never going to force them, but I'll always be clear as to what I'm seeing that can be improved and why, and I'll do my best to always explain that. I'm also a clinical psychologist in my full-time job, and so I always think about people in situations having emotions and thoughts, and then doing stuff. And so I feel like that also informs how I think about scenes. And like Rebecca, I also think about really interweaving that emotional arc or emotion plot with the actual action plot, and making sure that there's a tie-in and a connection. So that's something that I'll always be looking for, or working with the author that I mentor to build upon.
When I first met my co-mentor, I was like, okay, I need to read your book. I want to be your critique partner. That is what I, you have, we entered a contest, the same contest, and some of her work was posted on the blog, and I was like, this is the best thing I've ever read. I need to be your critique partner. And so she sent me her book, and I was reading it, and I was like, wow, this is the best book I've ever read. How am I supposed to help you? How am I supposed to be your critique partner? Like, I was terrified that I wasn't going to be able to be her critique partner because her book was so good, and I didn't know, but then I just got so excited when I saw stuff that I had notes on, because I was like, yes, then I get to be her critique partner and I can help her. So I was and that was the same feeling I had last year during the selection period, where my mentee, I was reading her book, and I was like, I cannot believe this is not published yet. I think every child needs to read this book. And then it was like, oh, and I know how I can help it, and we can do this and we can do that. And so I think I am a big cheerleader, and I know Mira's as well. And also just being able to really dig in and take the manuscript to the next level, and really level it up in a way that maybe if you are getting full requests, but you're not getting an agent, what is something that you can do to really bring it to that next level? Like last year, my mentee Crystal and I, she did an entire rewrite from third person to first person. Generally, an agent isn't going to work on that with you, because it is kind of a risk. And so, but she was so close, and we knew it and we could see it. And she was like, okay, I'm just going to rewrite the whole thing into first person. And so I just really loved doing that. And I know that we'll do the same thing this year as well, but not necessarily rewriting it into a different tense or perspective, but
By the way, if you see me laughing and looking off screen, it's because my cat has decided that now is a good time to knock everything off of the table. So she's right there.
Mine are locked out because they are champions of walking across the screen while I'm trying to talk to a client or something.
She's been good in the other chats, but today, I guess, this one's earlier. So Lee, our social media director, she said, personal note, I've taken Jessica's course on using cognitive psychology to approach characters, and it is brilliant.
Oh, thanks, Lee.
Okay,
that's amazing.
We have a question from Cindy. In my fantasy manuscript, time and age are different. My main character is a, quote, youth, but his age is undefined. Is that going to be a problem I should address? Thank you all for your time. Anybody want to jump in?
I really like specificity. I think it really adds to a book. If it's undefined for a reason, or he doesn't know how old he is, I think that's really interesting. But if it's because you don't know how old he is, then maybe you could figure that out. I think that his age doesn't need to be defined, but I would say, like, if it isn't, why not? Because that sounds really interesting too. So I think that you could do it, but if you're trying to make it like more universal, like, oh, like he's a youth, like it could be anyone. Sometimes the really specific things are actually what's most intriguing and what feels more universal. So I wouldn't be afraid of that.
I would like to add that there is a big difference in emotional development from an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old. And I'm sure Jessica could speak to this even better. But if you don't know, even if you don't define it, that's one thing, but it must be clear in your mind that this is a 12-year-old, this is a 13-year-old, this is an 11-year-old, because they're going to react in different ways. Their emotional development is at a different level. So I understand the impulse to try to keep it open for everyone, like Maria suggested. It's a very nice impulse. But as far as the emotional development, like she said, that specificity, I don't know how she said that so easily, is really important. Middle grade, and in YA too, those years, it's not like they blend together. They do have very different behaviors and reactions to the world around them. So it's important for you to know.
Yeah, I was going to add, there are some really, really specific themes in middle grade that we're going to be looking for. We're completely fine if you've got some amazing world building where your magical creature is an adolescent at age 152, as long as they actually read like an adolescent, as long as they're looking at their place in their friend group and trying to figure out who they are and dealing with all those classic middle grade issues. But I will say that that Jessica and I specifically will be pounding on you about the world building, because we want to know that your character's 152 and that that's the equivalent of a 12-year-old, and that they reach maturity at 175, and then they go on and do this, and we want to know like the science behind that and everything else. So how's that for a maybe? Maybe it works.
I would just add, and I wouldn't have any problem with a manuscript like that, and that could be part of what we discover together in the process of the mentorship. But thinking about subbing and thinking about querying, one of the things that's tricky is that for selling books, there needs to be a very clear market, like who is your target audience? And so an editor and certainly a bookseller, they're going to want to understand what shelf to put the book. So I really think that it's in your best interest, if you're not sure, to use pitchwars perhaps, or your critique partners to explore that so that you can put those themes in. And of course, I agree with everything that the others have said.
Rebecca, something you said really made me think of Erik Erikson and like his stages of development. And one thing, if you've hung out with a group of kids who are in 6th grade and then you see them when they're in 7th grade, it is unreal. Like, who are these people? Like, these are not the people I saw 3 months ago. And so it's you can see like the stages of development in like in the chart are like, is like interesting, but then you see it in real life and you're like, oh my gosh, this is totally different. It's so cool. And I'm a social worker, so I get really nerdy about that stuff. But that's what it made me think of when you mentioned that, because it really, there's different stages of development within middle grade covers a couple different ones. So it's pretty cool.
Woohoo, Maria in the biz, high five.
Anybody else? All right, we have a question from Lee. What are some of your favorite go-to writing and publishing resources, books, podcasts, websites? And for those of you who don't know, Lee Marr is our social media director. So most of these questions she's bringing to us from Twitter.
We have, Jessica and I have almost every mentee that we work with read Story Genius by Lisa Cron. I think it's really an excellent resource for understanding the internal motivations of your characters. And one of the cool things about working with Jessica and I is that she's amazing on plot, and I am really character focused. And so together we get that working intermingling of the internal, the emotional plot and the action plot. And I think Story Genius is a really good way to make sure that your action plot is underpinned by what's happening emotionally with your character, their motivation and their desire. I really, really love Jane Friedman's blog for the business of writing. And I feel like I still, after years of being in the business, read her blog every day and learn something about the business. So I think those would be my top two recommendations.
I want to follow up on that because I'm also a big Lisa Cron fan. And I love Wired for Story. Like, my Wired for Story is covered with ink markings and pencil and folded down pages and Post-it notes and napkins from airplanes that I put in when I was reading. And it's almost become like a tarot deck for me when I feel kind of stuck or I'm not quite sure what the next thing is or the emotion is. I'll just kind of open the book and read for a little bit. And within pages, I'll be like, oh, okay. So I'm a huge fan of her. I also really, really like The Emotional Craft of Fiction by Donald Moss. I think the exercises are really well structured. Whatever you think of the text, the exercises are worth doing. And that's another one where you can kind of pick it up. There are exercises throughout, and just choose a set to work on, and it will definitely open some things for your work with your character development and even some plot elements. And I also do love Save the Cat. I'm very much, even though my books have always been described as literary, I feel like they're very plot, commercial plot. So it's funny kind of how those two go together. But like, Julie was saying, it's that emotional underpinning that I think kind of gets dubbed the literary side. And it's the external plot elements that get dubbed, kind of the commercial side. But you need both. Every book needs both, whether it weights more on one side or the other. And I think when you can find that balance between the two, then you've hit on something really special. So so I'm a big fan of craft books and using the beat sheet. So.
And I would love to jump in right now because one of my favorites is this one, Second Sight by Cheryl Klein. And I feel like when I was new in writing that this book was the one that helped me understand exactly what Rebecca was just talking about, how the emotion and action plots really work together. And it's just so practical, and there are so many great ways of thinking about it. And she's an editor, so she also will go through practices where she'll like dismantle a paragraph and show you how to tighten. And you could probably tell that this book is well loved because it's clearly been dropped in the bathtub at least once. And then I so second this one. I've actually been able to do one of his one-day workshops, and this book is really great. It definitely helps you access the emotion level in totally different ways, so sophisticated. And what I love to do with this one is once I have my first draft polished, like I'm in maybe draft 2, draft 3, and now I'm really looking to go nuanced and really looking for special moments, I'll pick this up with a book that I'm writing in mind, and I'll flip through and do some of the exercises, and I always get a bunch of sparks that I can now interweave a little bit further on. So my two favorites right here.
I'm really jealous that you got to do a one-day workshop with Donald Moss. I did a 1-hour workshop with him. It like changed my entire life. So
it was great. It was really some of what we did there, some of the exercises, and I actually, since I grabbed those, I grabbed my book. Some of what I did in his workshop ended up in here in like my final revisions, because again, it's really great for those later stage nuance edits. Really, really helpful.
I'm really into podcasts. So one that I think that is really good for middle grade specifically is Books Between with Karina Allen. She's a 5th grade teacher, and she's really awesome. And so that's really good to get to know about different middle grade books. It's a good one to hear interviews with authors, and also kind of how does a 5th grade class work? Like what kind of books are they liking? What kind of things are they gravitating towards? How does she teach it? Like, this is all really good stuff to know. And then more book specific or publishing specific, I have the Literati Cast, Books Between, oh, I already have Books Between, 88 Cups of Tea, Ride or Die, which is 2 of our committee, Pitchwars committee members. They do that one. And then First Draft with Sarah Ennie. Print Run is very like publishing specific. It's with agents. And then in terms of books, I like the book Dear Allie, How Do You Write a Book by Allie Carter. It's for a YA audience. So she wrote like a writing book for young adults, and I think it's really good. And then another one that is by another podcast that I like that's by Pitchwars mentors and mentees is All the Kissing. It is romance specific, but sometimes, especially if you're writing in dual perspectives, I think that if you like adult romance and you write in G, you might as well use that to help you really hone like how to use a dual point of view, because it is something that romance is really, really good at. And so you can use that as like a jumping off point. And obviously, like, they're very different genres. So if that's not what you're into, then you don't need to do that. But and obviously read a ton of middle grade, because that is very important.
Anybody else? I think Print Run has been mentioned on every video chat that we've done so far. And I listened to it too, and I didn't listen to it for a long time because I thought it was focused on querying writers, but it's not. It's just like general publishing news. So even if you are past the querying stage, it's still valuable, I think. And they have talked about Pitchwars twice, and I thought, and both times it was kind of like a touchy subject, and they did a great job of covering that. So okay. We have a comment from Courtney. Courtney says, I love Lisa Cron's work on story. I purchased her Story Genius course through Creative Live and refer back to it often. I also want to mention a book by an author. He actually writes like male erotica, but he used to work in the film industry, and he's just really great with story and motivation. And his book is Verbalize, and it's a really interesting concept that I hadn't heard discussed anywhere else before. All right. Question from Frank on Twitter. I read almost exclusively middle grade, and recently the books are trending towards 75K words. Would a lengthy Pitchwars manuscript be a reason to pass it by? Thank you.
We picked up pardon me, Jessica and I picked up a mentee last year with a 90,000 word middle grade. Now, I will tell you, we made her trim it down. She had originally written it as YA, but it really had a lot of middle grade themes in it. And so it worked better for the character and for the story itself as middle grade. But she still came in about 70,000 words at the end. Both Jessica and I write upper middle grade, and our manuscripts, especially in the fantasy realm, end up being toward 70,000 words. I just finished a revision at 69.5, which is the longest middle grade I've ever written, but it's not a deal breaker for us. If you come in with 120,000 word, then we'll be having a different conversation. But if it's 75, 80, we would have said before last year we'd never take a manuscript that was 90,000 words, but we fell in love with the story, so you just never know.
I will say too, so that word count is something that editors do take very seriously. My first book, Steering Toward Normal, sold at 54,000 words, but published at 76. And so there is a difference between querying something that's says 75,000 words versus something that your editor says needs more words. So that's something to keep in mind. And having said that, for my second book, Boy Bites Bug, it was actually in my contract that it would be no more than 50,000 words. Okay. So, you know, which I was kind of like, oh, I mean, that makes sense, but it startled me. But I realized, of course, that there are different printing costs. There are how many books you can put in a box for shipping. There are a lot of different factors that go into it. So it's not only, you know, what we're willing to work with, but we are also thinking, you know, what is kind of the average in your category? What do we think is sellable, so that we're not, you know, kind of sending you out there with something that we're like, we know editors aren't looking for humorous middle grade that's 80,000 words. You know, humorous middle grade tends to be 45, you know. So there are a lot of different factors that go into it. It's not only word count that we're looking at, but we are thoughtful about what it means for your future with, you know, querying the manuscript. And I did want to add, I'm sorry, I did want to add that we are often muting our mics. So if you see us doing something like because our mics are muted, not that we're, you know, strangely spastic. So
I was just going to say that you'll see a lot on writing websites and blogs that, you know, word count is very important. And then some people will say, well, word count's really not that important. Just tell the story. And you're going to see both opinions. So you'll have one, you know, you might have an editor be like, it's too long or it's too short. And someone else thought the complete opposite. So I just think that it's a really great skill to become competent in, to be able to cut your word count and to just have a good process for how do you look out for things that can be trimmed? How do you look out for tightening? How do you look out for words that you just don't need? And that could be part of what you get out of the Pitch Wars experience, taking away a skill like that that you can be using across your career.
All right, anybody else? I want to make sure we don't miss anyone. We have a question from Shannon on Twitter. How many point of views are too many in middle grade?
If it's over 100, I might be like, wow, that's a lot. But if you have y'all read the last 5th grade of Emerson Elementary?
I was going to mention the same thing.
It was a Pitch Wars book. She was a Pitch Wars mentor. So, you know, friend of the live chat. But oh my gosh, that book is so good. And my co-mentor and I, we both love it. And it has 27 points of view, or is it 18? I don't know. Rebecca, do you know how many points of view it is? Your mic is muted.
No, I actually had it open on a tab to talk about it. And so I was just clicking through to see, I can't remember offhand, but it's definitely around 20.
And so it's like an entire class, and it's a novel in verse. So like they're like each of their poetry assignments. And anyway, if you're asking this question, definitely read that book. 18. Okay. So 18, you know, it does seem like a shocking number of points of view, but it's done so well, and highly recommend that if you're going to be going high. But I guess my answer to that question is, you know, it's not very low.
I would say that what we're looking for in multi-point of view, first I'll say I love multi-point of view, and I want to see more of it in middle grade. I think for a long time, people were like, oh, middle grade readers can't keep track of that many points of view, but that's totally wrong. Middle grade readers are super sophisticated, and they're like really at their peak of reading in terms of just really immersing themselves in worlds and following things through, I think, better than adults do in terms of falling in love with characters. But I think what Jessica and I would be looking for with points of view is, do they have a strong, distinct voice? and do they serve a purpose in the story that is different than if it was just one main character. So last year we did actually cut some points of view with our mentee, just because the characters didn't pass both of those tests. We found other ways of getting those characters' stories in other than their own point of view. But that said, I would never say you can't do 18 points of view, but you have to do them as well as last fifth grade at Emerson Elementary, which is really a fine art and a difficult skill. I would say if it's your first manuscript that you've ever written, maybe tackling more than 1 or 2 points of view might not be your best strategy. But if you've written a few and you have strong voice and you can really do things to differentiate the characters, so that we don't have to flip back to the chapter header to see whose point of view the story is from, then I think you're good.
Okay, anyone else? For those of you who are a mentor team, so I know Maria and Julie are. Rebecca, are you co-mentoring or just yourself? Okay, cool. How do you divide the mentoring?
Jessica and I have a really good system, I think, or at least it works really well for us. We've been critique partners for 5 years, so we know each other really, really well. We're really good friends. And so we joke all the time that we have this mind meld where we just don't even, like, we can complete each other's sentences. But what we do is we both read, and we both make notes, but then we put those notes together so that the mentee isn't confused or isn't getting conflicting things. So we usually take turns, like Jessica will read first, send me her notes, and then I'll read and add my notes. And if there are anywhere I'm like, wait, I had a different take on this scene, or I had a different take on this plot point, then we'll just discuss them and hash it all out between the two of us before we send anything to the mentee, so that hopefully they're never confused, never getting conflicting reports on anything. And usually all of our email chains, we're all copied on it, so that we can, even when we're brainstorming, even if Jessica and I say different things, we can say, you know, what about this? And then I say, or if you don't like that idea, what about this? And just to keep it from being confusing for the mentee. And we do have kind of notoriously long edit letters. Jess will start it and then think that, like, we're good, it's only 6 pages long, and I'm like, but I haven't added my thoughts yet. And then it's 12 or 15 pages long. But all helpful information.
Other than the notoriously long edit letters, which since we haven't been a mentor team yet, I don't know how long ours are going to be, but our process is going to be incredibly similar, sending one email or one edit letter that's combined of our thoughts, and anything that we might think about differently, we will hash out before we give it to you, so that way it's just cohesive and really, really helpful information for our mentee.
I unmuted my mic like 3 times, sorry. Okay. Brittany. Hi, when I was a preteen, there you go, I read beyond my age range to get the intellectual stimulus I needed. What are your thoughts on elevating the complexity of language/themes in middle grade when it's in a 12-year-old point of view?
Well, middle grade can pretty much do anything within reason. I think that I also just keep in mind that with middle grade, it's not only going to be 12-year-olds reading it. So there are going to be 9, 10, 11-year-olds reading a 12-year-old's point of view. So for them, that is like an emotional and intellectual stimulus. And in terms of like what might differentiate YA and middle grade, the lines are getting more blurry now. Upper middle grade is becoming a lot more common, and Julie, you mentioned that earlier, so I'm sure you have thoughts on this as well. I think that in terms of language, have at it. And then if your editor at a certain point thinks it might be like alienating for some readers, then you guys can talk that through and figure that out. But I think that some kids are pretty good at self-selecting and being able to be like, I'm not emotionally ready for this YA book. Like this is something that I don't want to think about right now. They're really, really smart people, and they can kind of figure out, yes, this is not for me. And so a lot of people will have a lot of thoughts about the difference between YA and middle grade, and what to do with the space in between. But I would just say, remember that your readers are really smart people, and that a lot of them will learn language from your book. And I use Spanish sometimes in my books. And so if you have a word that you don't think your readers are familiar with, think about it the same way. Like if I'm using Spanish in my book, like, okay, I'm not going to like give an explanation or put in parentheses like, this is what this means in Spanish, but context clues.
And I think that speaking more specifically about theme than language, I think that a lot of themes are really fine for middle grade, even ones that we might think are pretty mature. But I really think it's the way that you're filtering how that main character or the cast of characters are experiencing whatever the topic is. So you can have a theme that's pretty intense, and you can have an adult experiencing it and a young adult or a middle grade person. And just the nature of what they're going to be reacting to, or what they're going to notice in the scenes, or the way their emotions are going to play out. I actually just read, I'm a senior editor for a lit mag, and I just read a really great story by an author who was essentially writing a sort of the world is about to end story, but from the perspective of a kid who was about 5, and it took place 2 days before Christmas. And so you learned everything about the end of the world that was happening, but it was in the context of, they always said we couldn't afford a bike, but my uncle just went out and brought me a bike, and he had some blood on his face, but he was just so excited to give me my bike, and I put it in my room, and we couldn't go outside and ride it right now because he says we have to wait. So like, everything that's going on in that story, but it was how the person chose to show you that through the perspective of someone who's 5. And I just thought it was so well done. So I don't know if that person is even aware of pitchwars, but if you're out there, I loved that story.
There's been some really interesting discussions of upper middle grade on Twitter the last week or so that I encourage you to check out. There's really a need for that in-between space. Like there's so many, I read 12-year-old main characters all the time. And there are 12-year-old main characters that read like 6th graders, and there are 12-year-old characters that read like 8th graders. And they're reading like 8th graders because a 13-year-old narrator a lot of times is frowned upon. But that space, that 13-year-old, 14-year-old space, that's where kids are really looking for stuff. They might not be quite ready for YA yet, but if they don't find anything in that space, YA is what they're going to read, because they're not going to read, if I'm 12, 13 years old, I'm not going to read an 11-year-old main character, because I'm going to be like, I'm past that stage already. I want to read about what I'm dealing with right now, which is different at age 13, 14. I have a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old at home, and I can tell you that what they're experiencing right now is completely different than what they were experiencing when they were 11 and 12. And so they need those books. And both of my kids now, I'm putting as much upper middle grade in their hands as I can get, but both of them are reading mainly YA because there's not that much in the 13-year-old, 14-year-old space for them. So I think it's important to make books for those ages. That's the age that I aspire to write for, because I don't see enough of it. And hopefully that's what agents and editors will start buying, because teachers and librarians and parents are clamoring for those stories.
And I'll say, so my first book came out in 2014, and the main characters are 13 turned 14 in the book. So squarely upper middle grade. But the thematic elements aren't YA. You know, they're definitely middle grade. And so my publisher, you know, promoted it as middle grade, but Barnes and Noble shelved it in teen. And that creates a problem. And that's why upper middle grade, as far as the publishing end, hasn't really had a space. I think that's starting to change. I just read a wonderful book called Cursed with a 15-year-old main character who has a very strong form of arthritis. And so I wouldn't call the book YA. Many of the thematic elements are, you know, it's upper middle grade. So I love seeing, and I know that there's another one with the swimmer on the cover that just came out that's upper middle grade, and the name is, oh, it's going to kill me. But she's a swimmer. And so I love that this is blossoming, but part of the issue is just where does it go on shelves? And I think that with indie bookstores, that is less of an issue. They're much more willing to make space for those kinds of books. And I think that there is such a move and support for indie bookstores. I think that can only help develop the category. Thank you. Julie wrote Up for Air by Lori Morrison is the other upper middle grade I was thinking of. And I also think an important reason for this, and now I'm getting on my, you know, soapbox, but an important reason is this is where we start to lose readers, especially boy readers, is that middle space where they don't want to read the big YA fantasy books that kind of dominate the category, but you know, they don't really have anything in the middle for them. You know, they've read all of Chris Crutcher's books and, you know, James Patterson or whoever it is that they love, and then it just kind of, there's a gap. And so I'm a big fan of upper middle grade, and I would love to see some in my, well, we can't talk. Okay. I got a little too close to the edge there. Sorry.
Even if it is something that's squarely middle grade, or if it's younger middle grade, keep in mind that there are 11 and 13-year-olds, 11-year-olds dealing with homelessness, with a parent with alcoholism, with and basically what Jessica said, like, it all is about how are they experiencing it. In an adult novel, the character themselves might deal with alcoholism. In a YA novel, maybe there is a pregnant teenager who's experiencing things through that lens. And then think about for the 10-year-old, well, now what is their purpose in that situation? Or not purpose, but how do they experience that situation? So basically everything Jessica said a second ago.
Okay, we have a question from Cindy, and this is about comps in a query. Are mashups better than comps in a query? My mashup is The Hobbit meets Rogue One, theme being that the little people make a difference, but comps are Ranger's Apprentice and Rules for Thieves. Thoughts?
Comps aren't really a big deal for me. I think that's something that we can work with later in the query. But I know for me personally, I'm definitely kind of skipping ahead to the pages and, you know, maybe quickly reading the pitch and scanning the synopsis. But, you know, I wouldn't stress. You know, if you have, you know, some comps or mashups that you like, then great, use it. And if you feel like it helps sell your story, but it's also not something that I think, you know, trips up any of us, you know, so.
I agree. I love comps for hooking me in, but I'd rather have you not have them than to use ones that aren't really applicable. I would say that when we're working with a mentee, like Rebecca said, we will try to come up with comps that show that you have read recent books. I would say with the comps in this example, those are all a little bit older. I would maybe, I mean, obviously Rogue One is newer, but it's a movie, not a book. But for agents, what you want to show is I've read widely. I'm not saying I've written the next Harry Potter, but I haven't read a middle grade for 20 years since Harry Potter came out. You want to show that you've read widely in books that have come out in the last 3 to 5 years. And so that's what we would be encouraging people to put in comps. One of the first things that we do with our mentee is give them 2 or 3 books that we think would be recent comp titles for them to read if they haven't read them. And yeah, Harry Potter is 20 years old. It is true. It's hard to believe. But that we give them some recent titles to read if they haven't read widely, just to make sure that they know what's being published. A big red flag for agents is if you're like, I have written a book that nobody has ever written before, and it's a story about the son of Poseidon who goes to a camp for other half-blood, people, and then they're like, oh wait, that's the lightning thief, and you don't know that. Like, you don't know the market, so you don't want to have something like that in your query letter. But don't worry about it at the applying to pitchwars stage. Your mentor will help you get it right for your query.
Agreed with everything y'all said.
I always say that a great comp can really help, but if you don't have a great one, then it doesn't matter. Like Mary Mancusi, her Scorch series, she always says it's Terminator, but with dragons. And so that's a great comp. It tells you right away like what that story is. But if you don't have something like that, then don't try to force it. All right. Stephanie has a question. I have a 78,000 word manuscript I originally wrote as YA, but shelved it out of frustration when critique partners told me my main character acted younger. What do I need to do to ready this manuscript to enter it in the middle grade category?
Julie, this seems like a question kind of made for you.
Well, we did. Yeah, that's exactly what we did with our mentee last year. So she had a YA, and we had her age it down and make it middle grade, which involved cutting about 20,000 words out of the manuscript and cutting a bunch of points of view that weren't really working. I would say read some current middle grade, and if you haven't already, see what kinds of themes are being dealt with. I actually did a Moms Write podcast, and after this, I'll post it on my Twitter, all about the differences between middle grade and YA, and which themes are in each one, so you might refer to that if you follow me on Twitter, and then just look for any edits that you can make. I wouldn't worry too much about the word count at this point. I would just worry about the themes. If they're solidly middle grade themes, then you're probably fine. And then just, see if you can trim some stuff down and polish a little bit. But otherwise, just make the manuscript, as Maria said earlier, make it absolutely the best you can make it before the application window, and that'll give you the best chance of finding the right home. I'll definitely post it.
Who knows? Lee's been so good at posting things, she might have already done it. All right, so we are out of questions. Looks like I'm gonna just give you like 30 seconds to type one in real quick, but we're almost out of time, so it's good. I did have a question for y'all because I've been getting more into middle grade. And so can you just give me like 1 or 2 recommendations for books that have come out recently that you think are doing great things in the category?
This is a time where I can bring out my props, although I feel like you might have already read this book before. But have you read the book by our web genius of technology from Pitchwars, Gail? It's just really good, and I haven't actually read the published version yet. I've been a little busy this summer. However, I am just so, oh yes, The title of the book is, My Fate According to the Butterfly. Absolutely recommend that one.
That's by Gail
Villanueva. And
yeah, Villanueva.
Also, I would recommend another good pitchwar mentor book is I really liked Ellen Cole is Not a Coward. I think you would like that one, Sarah. I don't know, there's just so many good books. It's really hard to choose. I think my favorite series right now is definitely Love, Sugar, Magic. There's 2 books out by that one right now by Ana Mariano, and that's like a really good one. It's got like sisters and cooking and magic, and so I like that one a lot too.
I had mentioned Cursed, and I just wanted to look up it by Carol Ruth Silverstein. And like I said, that's a wonderful upper middle grade with fantastic disability representation and cursing, which you don't often see in middle grade, but was very fun and very well done. It was, appropriate. I also really, really love New Kid by Jerry Craft. I love it so much. I bought a bunch of copies for a giveaway. I just think every school should have a copy of this. It's a fantastic graphic novel, which just talks about issues with racial issues right now and social issues. And then one last one, it hasn't come out yet, The Queen Bee and Me by Gillian McDunn. And what I love about this book, and I just hope it will be on everyone's TBR, The Queen Bee and Me by Gillian McDunn, is that it talks about, that period for girls in middle grade when we're starting to exert some of our power. And it's very gentle. No one's the bad, no one's the bad girl. No one's, the villain or anything, even though people make different have different missteps. And it just very gently explores all sides of those power dynamics. If you've been the best friend, if you're the new friend, if one parent is like this or why another parent might be like this. And it's just so kind and thoughtful and not pointing fingers, not making anyone a bad guy, just kind of looking at all facets of those kind of changing power dynamics in friendships, especially girl friendships. And I absolutely loved it. I think that so often in those kind of girl friendship stories, it's the one queen bee and she's, a brat. And it's just kind of coming to terms with, I have to break up with her. And that's kind of it. And that's not actually a healthy way to move forward in all of our relationships. So I just really appreciate it. And, Queen Bee and Me, New Kid, and I really loved Curse. But there's so much fantastic stuff going on in middle grade right now. Like I can barely keep up with all of my reading just because there's so much good stuff. So we're in a very lucky time.
I just finished recently Beyond the Bright Sea by Lauren Polk, which I think is really one of the most beautiful middle grades I've ever read. It's I think it actually stands up to being for adults too, not just for kids. I've been recommending it to everyone. I just recommended it to my mom, who doesn't read middle grade at all. And I was like, just trust me on this one. You're going to love it. It's lyrical, it's heartfelt. It has an amazing historical time period that it's dealing with, and it's really, really good. But I also really loved The Moon Within by Ada Salazar. It's a novel in verse that deals with your period, getting your period, which is a thing that's a big deal for girls in middle school years. And it hasn't been talked about enough in books. So, now I know I'm going to get flooded. Give me your period books, but they have to be fantasy. But it's a really, really a beautiful
We don't
book.
know that yet.
Oh, we're Team Unicorn Mojo. I think we know. But I also want to say that we have two Pitchwars co-mentors whose books have just come out that are really, really good, which is Pie in the Sky by Remy Lai and Midsummer's Mayhem by Rajani LaRocca. They're both Pitchwar success stories, and their books are fabulous, and they'll make you laugh and they'll make you cry. So go check them out. But lest I turn into a book recommendation engine, which I am, I will say go check out Middle Grade at Heart, which is a newsletter that I do with a few other Pitchwars affiliated wonderful ladies, including Remy and Rajani, where we every month do a book club about a middle grade book. And it's a great way for you to find out about some of the great, exciting things that are going on in middle grade. Middle Grade at Heart.
Jessica?
Okay. So I love the Pea Sprout Chen books by Henry Lean. He has at least 2 published so far, and they're set in a spectacularly original fantasy world about ice skating. They're so good. I loved The Hotel Between by Sean Easley that came out last year, which has really nice disability representation or differently abled representation. Of course, we've got May Respicio's book, The House That Lou Built, which was so much fun. And of course, I started obsessively looking up tiny houses after that. And I'd love to do a shout out for a book coming out in 2020 in January. It's called From the Desk of Zoe Washington. And it's by one of my writing group members, Janae Marks. And it's about a girl who's never known her father and finds out that he's been in prison her whole life. And she discovers he might be innocent of his crime. And she sets out to learn the truth. And it's just such a beautiful book. And I can't wait for people to read that.
Great, thanks. All right, so thank you all for joining us. I'm gonna ask each of the mentors, just let us know where we can find you online. And also if you have anything coming up that you wanna let us know about, like a book coming out or a giveaway coming up or something like that. Maria, you go first.
I'm everywhere at K Maria Writes, and my website is mariafraser.com.
Julie?
I am at Julie Arts, both on Twitter and on Instagram, and you can find out more about me at juliearts.com.
Jessica?
I'm at J Bayless Writes on Instagram and Twitter, and Jessica Bayless Writes on Facebook, and my website is jessicabaylesswrites.com. And for anybody who signs up for my newsletter, I have a monthly drawing for either something free to read or a free first chapter critique.
Rebecca?
I'm at Rebecca Petruck on Twitter and Instagram and my website. So it's pretty straightforward.
All right, I'm gonna switch the screen over to show the upcoming chats, the whole chat schedule, while we get everyone closed out of the chat. And thank y'all for joining us.
Thank you for moderating so well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks you to the mentors who joined us and answered everyone's questions, and all the viewers that came in and asked questions. Without your questions, we wouldn't have a chat. So we do really appreciate when y'all ask great questions. And if there's anything you want to know, make sure you tune into upcoming also video chats and also Ask Mentor chats. The Ask Mentor chats take place entirely on Twitter, and then the video chats are obviously here on YouTube. So make sure you check out the upcoming dates. And I do recommend that even if you're not necessarily in a category, that you check out the video chats, because they offer a lot of great advice that is obviously useful for the category, but not necessarily specific to the categories. Thank y'all for joining us. Have a great day.